Good morning, everybody. Good morning, every student. How are you? I hope everybody is safe at home, and I hope you're okay. Today, inshallah, we are going to speak about the type of poetry we already had three examples on in the previous three sessions. Today's type of poetry is lyric poetry. I prepared the presentation in order to let you understand it easily. The definition of lyric poetry, what is lyric poetry, what are the features of lyric poetry. In the beginning, we are going to start with the definition of lyric poetry and what it is. A lyric poem expresses the thoughts and feelings of a speaker about a setting, a moment, or an idea, such as nature, such as death, sometimes. In this form of poetry, a poet typically uses vivid musical language to express the speaker's observation, feelings, and insights. So the poet here uses a kind of personal language in order to show the speaker's observation, the speaker's experiences, the speaker feelings and insights. As a consequence, the reader's understanding is filtered through uh, um, uh, um, and shaped by the speaker's perception. What does it mean? Perception means recognition, understanding, observation. So, exactly, the reader will understand what the speaker wants to say because the speaker expressed everything about his observations, about his feelings, and about his way of thinking. What are the features of lyric poem? A lyric poem is meant exactly to be sung or spoken with music accompanying. Poets in lyric poem talk about something tangible. And what does it mean tangible? Something that you can measure or can feel or can use the five senses in order to recognize and observe. Personally seen, heard, felt, and thought. Obvious points of views, because the points of view here expresses the speakers or the narrator's point of view. So it is always the first point of view. If you remember, we have 3 points of view: the first point of view, the second point of view, and the third point of view. The first one is the narrator's point of view. The second point of view is one of the characters of the story, or if the narrator is outside the story. So when the narrator is one of the characters of the story, this is the first point of view. Hidden meaning is between lines, so it is not always clear. This means that the poet uses a lot of metaphors and similes in order to express his thoughts or even the feelings of the speaker. This is an example of a lyric poem. Okay, so you can read it after the presentation and after this recording. Um, what else? What about the speaker in lyric poetry? Is he or she always the poet, or he can be a narrator from inside the poem without having the poet as a narrator? Actually, it is like the narrator in a story. The speaker in a poem is an imaginary voice created by the poet. The speaker presents a unique view that expresses his or her thoughts, his or her feelings, his or her personality, and his or her attitude toward the subject. So it is the first point of view. So always the speaker's point of view is the first point of view. But does it mean that the speaker or the narrator is always the poet? No. So it is not necessarily the point of view of the poet himself or herself. Examples of lyric poems, we had already three examples in the previous week. Turtle Watchers, Nature is What We Say, and The Sparrow. The three poems are actually poems, lyric poems. You can find rhythm and rhyme scheme in these poems, and this is or that makes the music we spoke about. So when we speak about the lyric poetry, we need to remember always that lyric poetry is meant to be sung or meant to be spoken, accompanied to a kind of music. I'd like you to watch two videos today. The two videos are the videos of one of them speaks about the differences between narrative and lyric poems, and the other one speaks about lyric poems only and the features of the lyric poems. I'll share with you this video in order to see the difference between narrative and lyric poems. Watch it.
Today we're going to be talking about lyric poetry and narrative poetry. Let's get started. The definition of narrative poetry is simply poetry that tells a story. Just like any book you read, narrative poetry also contains characters, as well as a beginning, a middle, and an end. One example of narrative poetry comes from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. This poem tells the story of a man who is awoken from his sleep to something or someone knocking on his door. He then tells us about this raven who has perched itself above his door and won't leave him alone. The bird slowly begins to drive the man crazy. The details of this story are expressed throughout the poem, and the tension builds during the middle of the poem, ending with the raven continuing to sit above the man's chamber door. Just like in any story we might read, this narrative brings readers through the events of the story with vivid and powerful language. Let's move on to lyric poetry. A lyric poem is a poem that focuses on the thoughts or feelings of a single speaker. Because lyric poems focus on the feelings of a single speaker, oftentimes these types of poems are about love. But lyric poems can actually be about anything that stirs up emotion. Just like this lyric poem by Emily Dickinson that expresses the emotions of a person who thinks she is going insane. Let's take a look at these last lines. A drum kept beating, beating, till I thought my mind was going numb. These several lines describe the emotions and feelings of the speaker who can't seem to quiet the noise inside her head. We as readers get an inside look into these feelings, making this a lyric poem. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Created using Powtoon.
Let's move on to the next one directly in order to know more about lyric poetry and how lyric poems have actually many attributes. As you say, a lyric poem is a short poem that expresses deep personal feelings. What is the mood in the lyric poem? In a lyric poem, the mood is musical and emotional. As you think, always you'll find happiness, anger. Some famous lyric poems are Emily Dickinson, who wrote What There's a Water. The first one, the first poem we have. The whole always that point of view is the first point of view. I would like you to focus on these features. So the features of the lyric poem always are short, that it is a short poem, a personal one because it expresses the first point of view, emotional, musical, and subjective in the same. This is the end of our presentation, and I like everybody to actually study and watch the video again and again in order to answer the homework or the assignment I already assigned you. The deadline of this assignment is after 3 days from today. So hope you all the best. Bye bye.